AAA is in trouble.
Hey guys, and welcome to the flip side.
AAA is in trouble.
Well, what do we do on the flip side though?
AAA is in trouble.
Or is this the side with the flip?
Yeah,
AAA is in trouble.
explore a little bit on the side with the flip.
Oh yeah. Explore a little bit on the side with the flip.
AAA is in trouble.
So I didn't really have anything to make a video about, but I guess we can do something.
AAA is in trouble.
Welcome, everyone. This is the side with the flip. I'm Jetpack, and this is the side with the flip. Right. This is a video that I saw that Asmongold did the video on this, and I wanted to look at it and see if I had anything to say.
AAA is in trouble.
I guess I play more AAA games. I play indies. Yeah, maybe I'm not as qualified on this particular topic, but you know, I'm a gamer. I play a lot of games. I'm in the gaming space, so you kind of want to have an ear to this. So let's see what he has to say. This is by Bellular News. Bellular News. As you can see it here. Sorry, I can't see. I have this big R TV and I still can't read. And I definitely can't see it on here. So don't worry about that. Let's just get into it, and we're gonna stop and dawdling. What's up with the AAA space? I know a lot of it, but what's gonna happen?
This video is a true bombshell for the games industry. This is one of those things that can have true impact, so let me explain. What just happened is the European Union just rewrote the rules on premium currency in games. Of course, that's the home of Ubisoft, of CD Projekt.
Okay, so I noticed the premium currency thing because I was gonna have something about it earlier, and they had changed the way premium currencies work, but they have to give you the exact value for what like it says you get instead of doing that whole arbitration of sifting it through a bunch of other types of currencies that you don't really understand the value of. And I have loved that because it has made stuff infinitely cheaper. Like you can buy stuff for like $13.99 now, even though I don't recommend spending money on anything game related, but it's helped. Is this what he's talking about, or is this an aftermath of that, or is this how it has spread out? Let's go. Let's see what else you got to say. I'm sorry, I pause a lot.
Of DICE, of Remedy, and so many other companies. And make no mistake, the new rules that they have just laid.
Okay, wait, let me go back. The new rules. I'm going to put on the CC because I like to be able to see the read, you know, even though I can't really read or see, so don't mind me. I'm also joking when I say I can't read. I just can't see the words to read them is what I mean. I can actually read. It's fine.
Laid out could change gaming utterly. Actually change the games that you play. So you know those bundles where you've got to buy more currency than the item that you want costs? Or perhaps the idea of limited time events, of no refund.
Limited time events was not something I never necessarily cared about, but when it comes to like gacha games, they bother me because it's like when you see a unit. This specifically happened. It was Genshin Impact with that one dude with the Dragon Spine mission, and if you didn't do the Dragon Spine mission when it came out, that mission like no longer existed, so you just missed a whole part of the lore with some of the characters, and I thought that was kind of dumb. It was annoying. It's always been annoying. It's dumb. I don't know why they do it.
Refunds and digital purchases. These are all being fought against by legislators. And when the EU takes action, it's a large enough block that it can reverberate around the world. Strap in, this one could actually, honestly, be pretty fucking good. In September 2024, the EU proposed the Digital Fairness Act that was targeting all the practices online that make using digital services miserable. And in particular, it called out dark patterns in video games as one of the targets. And that's basically the gross manipulative techniques that trick and strong-arm money out of people, obviously especially applying to people who are not yet adults. That's all of those fun, dark patterns actually working and getting digital currency money out of people. But those dark patterns target the most vulnerable people the most. And there's no one more vulnerable in the eyes of the law than children. Everyone's feeling a little bit of the economic pinch, but it's not stopped the EU from taking action to protect kids, basically, from predatory premium currency models.
Is it Genshin? It won't be Genshin, but that would be funny.
No, today, it's a game about horses. It's called Star Stable. You've probably never heard of it, but if this all does turn out good, we'll have the horse girls to thank. This is Star Stable Online. It comes from a Swedish developer called Star Stable.
Okay, I have heard of Star Stable. I do not follow the drama on Star Stable.
Entertainment, and it is the game that may have just rewritten rules and monetization in the EU. So yeah, thanks, Source Girls. Now, it turns out that Star Stable just uses all of the premium currency tactics in the book, which makes it a pretty awesome example, right? Especially because it is targeted at a younger audience. So in March 24, the Swedish Consumer Agency filed a complaint with the EU-wide Consumer Protection Cooperation Network. That's a mouthful. And that complaint alleged that Star Stable Entertainment were targeting children and using harmful commercial practices that breached EU consumer regulations. Now, the findings corroborated much of those allegations. They found that the game made direct appeals to children in their ads, that they were
Sorry, I'm not good at doing these videos yet, but direct appeals to children in advertisements, the use of pressuring techniques such as pressuring through limited time practices, the lack of clear, transparent information, failure by the company to ensure that the influencers promoting their products clearly disclose commercial content. Okay, I mean, seems good enough.
using pressuring techniques like FOMO, which is particularly despicable when it's not, on adults, and there was a lack of transparency on purchases and loads more things. I mean, here's an example of one that's particularly rough. They were responsible for influencers promoting the game to kids without any disclosure of the spending risk. So, in short, it's bloody well damning.
Yeah, so if you're just going to have a game and then that game's not going to tell the kids the risk of the gacha system being depraved and predatory, and kids, when they don't know that, they don't think to think about it if you don't tell them. So, I mean, if they think about it at all, they don't care. So that makes sense.
Star Stable Entertainment now have a month to address complaints and propose solutions with their game, but what matters for our purposes today is the Consumer Protection Cooperation Network, we can just call the CPCN. They have laid out what they want. So I'll spell it out via an example. This is what should happen in the ideal world. You, dear gamer, want to buy yourself a new horse. You see that your new horse costs 300 star coins. The store tells you that's around £5, so it just lets you buy 300 coins exactly. You buy exactly what you need for the horse, rather than the current bundles that exist of 200 coins, or
This recently just happened, I believe, in some games. I don't know about every game, but we better find out.
400 coins, meaning that you always have to buy with some wastage, which just ends up giving the company more money. So in short, no obfuscation bullshit, no weird tactics. And worst of all for these companies, this will have them bloody well shaking. You'd have to have a refund policy, both for the coins and the horse. And none of this would be
Yo, adding a refund policy would be insane. But I think I heard somebody say that they'll add a refund policy, and then they'll add a clause to the refund policy that if you get a refund, then they just ban your account. We'll see how they do the refunds. That's a shady thing to do, but I could see it happening in some, because they'd be like, oh, you refunded, so that's considered fraud or something, and so we'll ban it for fraud purposes, and then you just never get your account back. I can see it.
pitched as a limited time event where you have got to get the thing right now. So that's an example then of how these policies should be applied, and each is indeed a massive win for consumers. But that would not matter if this amounted to nothing.
So the thing about the FOMO that I like is that if you get rid of the FOMO, does that do the standard banner thing, or like will they try to get around standard banners by adding like a third, like, special standard kind of banner, where like they'll put the good characters but you'll have to pay more for them? Like, oh, you'll pay this much to get it, but then once it goes to the standard, it'll probably go up in price instead of down, because you missed to get it on the cheap part, which is when they were dropping it. That's probably how they'll probably get around that. But being able to get characters after they've dropped the first time, however you can, or hopefully having some way to get the character after you've missed the banner more immediately than fucking waiting 6 months, would be fantastic. That would make a lot of games more fun, I guess, in the short term. But then I guess in the long way, you make your whole roster, and then you really have no reason to pull for new characters unless you like them. So it would slow down growth at some point, I would assume.
You could look at all this and think, right, so some Swedish horse game has got a slap on the wrist. No, it's more than that. This seems to have backbone. So here's the big important bit. These solutions are the backbone of what the European Consumer Organization calls key principles for trustworthy gaming environments. And these could cause huge problems for anyone who is using premium currency. When I say this could shake the foundations of the
Pretty much every game is using premium currency, so all games. I mean, every gacha game is definitely using premium currency. But, yeah. Like, gacha stores in games are going to have to change, even if they're not gacha games, whatever you want to classify those. And then side stores that you can get stuff and buy stuff with that they might have special currencies for, they have to change, but that might just be gacha still, I don't know. But I can think of a lot of games that would affect positively, and yeah, I don't see any negative to that.
game industry economy. I absolutely mean it. So these, which I'm going to spell out for you, are the minimum requirements for purchasing and using virtual currencies in the EU. And what's neat is the philosophy behind them. So the CPCN considers these premium currencies as an equivalent to the real money that is used to purchase them. And that for them means that they are just as worthy of legal scrutiny. So you can see how that is in a way a mindset shift that paves the way for actually treating these as they are. So just think about the last game that you played that had a premium currency in it. Whatever that game is, I want you to keep it in mind. And with that in your mind, I'm now going to go through the various different practices that this targets. So, prices for premium currency packs that are a little more than the available product. So you've got to buy extra coins, extra gems, whatever it may be. Obfuscation of how much currency is worth by always pairing currency with other items or multiple currency options.
So hopefully they can't upsell you or undersell you. And if they are, you'd be able to clearly see that how much that price is. Because, like, if they're like, oh, 5-star gems get you some outfit, and you're like, well, 5-star gems ain't that much, but each star gem also costs like $10. And then you're like, okay, so $50 is how much it costs. And then when they put, oh, you're actually spending $50 and not 5-star gems, then you're like, you know, like, I was hungry this week. You know, I could use that $50 to get, you know, some food. Instead of being like, oh, 5-star gems? 5-star gems is easy. Let me just rip off my arm and pay to get these 5-star gems. I don't need to eat today.
As an example, I think World of Warcraft may actually fall for that because it includes Trader's Tender in one of the new mount bundles. Another one, a complete lack of a refund option for making currency purchases or even for in-game items. So there would have to be a refund policy. That's something none of us are used to in these games. Also, FOMO practices to encourage buying. Those are going to be looked at, so some of those may no longer be allowed. And all of these practices are now something that the EU...
Taking the FOMO out of gacha games will change the landscape of gacha games immensely. Like, I don't even know how you would explain that type of feeling. Because, like, how gacha games are now, you're like, oh, this is character that's coming out. It's really cool. And you're like, well, I know I have to play within these next 2 weeks. Or else I have to wait until, like, 6 to 12 months before I get this character again. Getting rid of FOMO means that practice would probably have to be handled in a different way because... But I don't know how that would, I'm sure they would find some way to obfuscate that even more to make it still a headache, but I do think that getting rid of the FOMO would make a lot of games funner to play more regularly, if that makes sense.
can hold against developers and publishers, even more so if the parental controls of said game are not up to scratch. So it's less a case of me saying, can you think of any game that falls into those categories? And it's more me saying, can you think of a game that doesn't fall into those criteria?
That's what I was saying. Like, it feels like every game nowadays comes out with these practices that try to keep you playing the game longer or more often. But, like, imagine the free-to-play experience when you don't have to wait for the new character to drop. Like, you don't have to be like, okay, because, like, the free-to-play experience is, I don't even think within the 2 weeks that most of the stuff drops, or any game will drop materials and stuff that you will be able to get enough materials to make more than one real summon. You know, unless you've been, like, building up to that. And I think that will be adjusted heavily, because the main reason that people do that and play that way is because the game forces you by being like, oh, you want this character? Well, you know, if you don't play every day for the next 2 weeks, every single day, then you're definitely not getting this character. So I don't know how they'll address that. Maybe they'll have those characters come out and then you can just buy the character for however much it would cost to reach, like, the first pity, I would think, or soft pity. That would be my guess. Because if you just made, like, oh, I'm gonna drop a Calcharo or something and he's $300, no one's buying that. But if you made it like, oh, well, to get to pity it costs like 1,000 gems, which is like $60, and then you made them like $60 or something like that, maybe people buy them, maybe people don't. But at least you'll be able to obtain it either when you want it or when it comes out. So that thing of being like, I have to play the game as a free-to-play user if I miss a day, or if I miss a time, or if my electricity goes out for 10 minutes and that 10 minutes was like swap over time, or like, I'm sorry. If that was like something where like you go to work, you come home from work, and then by the time you get home from work, you're like, oh, I've been too tired to think about the game, and you finally think about it, but then you go to play the game, and then it's like, oh, well, there's been like a time switch, the day switches or something, because sometimes those will come pretty early. I think Dokkan's got to like 7 or 8 o'clock for their time shifts, but that's because they're on Japanese time, or Japanese time. Anyway, overseas, over there. And then you'll be like, oh, well, that day is gone. You can't get that day back, and then you're like, well, now I'm short to get the character I wanted. And that should be gone, or at least that should be addressed. Sorry for the rant, but like, that has happened to me a couple of times, and I would love to see that addressed, and so we don't have to worry about that no more.
Very security humongous, which might indeed be the point here. We know this is something the EU have been thinking about in other circumstances than just Star Stable. As an example, in September 2024, the European Consumer Organization published a report on popular online games, and in that report, they targeted Diablo 4, EA Sports FC 24, Minecraft, Fortnite, and a bunch of others, and it was all
Diablo 4 needs to be adjusted. I don't care what nobody say. If all of this happened because of Diablo, I would have been a lot less surprised that it happened because of some horse game and not because of Diablo, which had like 17 currencies that all fed into each other of various amounts of stuff. And oh god, I don't even want to get into it. It's awful. That game is so predatory. It's ridiculous. I'm sorry that it's just like the Aliens versus Predator freaking edition.
all about how the virtual currencies work. They were not thrilled on what they found in those games, right? Because many of them, well, they did the same things that, Star Stable did, that we do not like. And that straight up means we can say that Electronic Arts and Blizzard Entertainment are being directly targeted by this body. That really is something, so it's no wonder that the BEUC will be holding workshops to help European companies implement these new principles. Because it seems they may actually have to implement them. Everything that they previously thought was acceptable pretty much now isn't.
That's what I'm saying. Like, literally everything that makes gacha games like the genre of game that it is, if this gets like really heavily done, will change. Like, gacha games will basically no longer exist in the current climate of the state of the world, I think. And the only reason gacha games exist is because they start off being free. So, free games coming to an end, or indies finna pick it up.
And here's the shocking thing. That's not my commentary. That is what the industry response has been, so we know they are shaking in their boots. It ain't surprising the industry bodies aren't thrilled about this, and a big shout out to one of our Belgrade Games members, Neo Nebulosa, for directing us to this stuff. So, the European Game Developers Federation and the Video Games Europe, or two groups basically, they've published a joint statement that expresses their disappointment with the findings. Let's read their statement. Quote, "We are disappointed by the lack of engagement from the CPC network in creating these principles, which introduce new legal theories and misguided interpretations of EU consumer law that will create confusion and disruption for European customers." Sidebar.
So I think he was saying that they're just gonna change the rules to make it more confusing, or they have changed the rules to make it more confusing, or they read the rules and was like, well, if we muddy the waters this way, then we can get away with this stuff. And they're like, no, you're misinterpreting the rules, and we need to change that. And I see nothing wrong with that. If that is correct, I'm not positive.
Oh no, we're going to be disrupted by sort of annoying predatory stuff going away. What an awful disruption. Back to the statement. It will also present a challenge to the industry's future growth and could even deprive millions of consumers access to their favorite games. Now that last bit is the interesting thing.
See, that's what I'm saying. Once you get rid of all of the predatory practices, gacha games have no way to sustain the amount of money they make by tricking you into spending money and then using that trick to guilt you into spending more money to get you then into a loop of when you've gotten so sunk into the cost of, I've already spent $75, I might as well spend $3,000. And then that's how you know you're defending the game while it's trying to bend you over and slap your booty because you're like, well, if I don't defend it, then I can't defend these purchases I made. And if I don't defend these purchases I made, then I'm an idiot. And you're an idiot.
So, understandably, right, these groups, representing the most powerful players in the industry, did quite like things the way that they were. Change is dangerous, especially to the bottom line, and especially change like this. But in a way, they're not inherently wrong. It is true that audiences do actually understand premium currencies by and large right now, and when implementing currencies, these companies were following, their best legal guidance, and now that guidance has changed. I guess just like how so many phones had like a bespoke charging cable until the rules just changed in the middle of the game. So now they've got to get used to these new rules. And what'll sting is the impact on their bottom line. They're not wrong about the potential impacts of all of this. Now, big companies like Ubisoft can probably absorb the costs of any legal challenges or damage from rebuilding their premium currency systems. They'll probably spend a whole lot to try and figure out ways around these principles. As for smaller companies, well, they may not find that so easy. But where things will be dramatic is the group's final warning, because it's the most threatening one. It's the idea that players in the EU may just be locked out of video games. They'd say with a game like Overwatch, right? They would simply choose to geo-restrict access to the game rather than change their monetization model or to just continue the game as normal and risk EU lawsuits. It could just be they look at the EU and think, you know what, we make enough from the States and other countries, we really don't need them. That being said, the EU population is kinda huge. Overall GDP is obviously a very, very
Them cutting out a whole section of the gaming market just to continue to sell more predatory games would probably start the consumer questioning as to like how greedy that the gaming industry would be to cut out an entire region just to keep those practices. Like, I think them accepting it and voting would probably have a better outcome overall than them fighting back and risking damage to their integrity, because I don't think they win the fight at the end of the day. So if they lose the fight and the war, then morale goes down, and then when this new change starts happening, the companies that were found to like be against it will have the most scrutiny against them, and then they will probably get pushed out of the industry, and then all of those people are going to either have to look for jobs or find new jobs or do whatever. And unless there's a concerted effort by gaming companies to do something, I don't know what they could do, then I don't think that they fight this. If they fight it, it would end badly for everybody, I think, because it just shows that they really don't care. But some people will see that and be like championing that. So wherever, I still don't think it ends ultimately positively for them. But let's keep going.
Very flawed metric. But as an example, right, just Googling this here in 2024, the EU's nominal GDP was about 17.9 trillion and 1/6 of global nominal GDP, which is quite a lot of money. And a hell of a lot of that GDP globally will be in other countries like, say, China, where a lot of these companies will not be able to go in and directly monetize. That could actually mean that they will feel the need to change. And in a way, there are two wolves inside me who are fighting, right? I suppose one.
If they do feel the need to change, it will be against their interests, but ultimately it will be what's best for the industry. But they don't really care about what's best for the industry because they only want to make money. Sorry, Mike fell.
One of them is the pragmatic wolf. The other one is the almost like the last vestiges of some sort of libertarian idealism that says, let the market decide. If the gamers do not like the bad practices, the gamers shall not partake in them, and the market will solve the problem. And I wish that was true, but I feel there's almost a faux idealism in.
So, personally, if I was to have a take on this, I would say the issue with that particular statement is that some people cannot fathom what is beyond what they know. So you introduce somebody to the color green, they've never seen the color green before. Say they've never seen any colors, and you introduce them to the color green. They will think in shades of green. So they may be able to get to, I don't know, you know what I'm trying to say. Like, so you take somebody with a green, they can see in shades of green, but like, you give them a magenta, and they're like, they never even consider what a magenta is. Hopefully that makes sense. It took me a long time to get to where I was trying to go, but hopefully that makes sense. So I think that in the grand scheme of things, if you give somebody a gacha game with all the bells and whistles, and then you said, hey, think of a game that's not this. I don't think, if you said, I'll give you something that's not this and this, people who've already had it will only be able to be like, well, I don't want this because if this is all I know, I can only comprehend this getting worse. Or if you change any of what I like about this, then I will hate it. Not understanding that the stuff that you probably don't like about this, if they change, you'd probably like the game even more, but you just never even considered that option because you were never given the ability to even perceive that as an option. Hopefully that makes sense.
In so much of that, because these psychological hooks, these psychological triggers, they do actually work. We're in a world where you can very easily make, I think, some sound enough, philosophical arguments very much against regulation and all of that, and I totally get that. I'm fairly sympathetic towards that in many cases, but the thing is, we've also got to be pragmatic, and a part of that is being a bit humble about the human condition. And the fact of the matter is, these practices are not popular. People do not like them. Yet, people's behavior does continue. And these obviously are bad. And as people who enjoy video games, we see that as these types of practices...
That's another thing. Like, you gotta consider, like, people be in terrible relationships all the time. People be with people they really don't have no business being with. You don't think that they're gonna play a game they ain't got no business playing? Like, they have all of the information right there at the tip of their fingers to know that they should not be participating in the situation that they are doing and participating in. But because they've already done and participated in it, there is no change. There is no going back. There's only moving forward and changing what they have going on, staying in that same train, but making that train as nice as possible instead of getting off of that and getting onto the actual good train over there. People would rather be stuck in monotonous things that they understand and they can predict than go and do something brand new. So it's a human flaw, I guess, to be stuck in the ways. But we all kind of like that a little bit.
derive more and more revenue, they then become what the companies focus on. And that is worse for the actual video games. Because I suppose in a way, how much of game industry revenue comes essentially from psychological manipulation?
Like 90% of it, and then like the rest of the 10% is like the gameplay if it's good. And then it's like 2% is like online capabilities, if that even happens.
These various business strategies that are designed to rake in revenue in a way that's not like really tied to the experience of a game that you purchase. We've just seen the share of that increase and increase and increase, and it's no wonder that as that is increased, the rest of us have become less and less satisfied with games. So in a way, if this does hurt the revenue of a bunch of companies and unfortunately leads to a bunch of job losses because these types of practices are no longer viable, good riddance. Good riddance, absolutely. Let the companies fail, let those jobs go down. How we run things should be a dialogue.
I agree with that 100%. If people can't understand that this is the wrong way to do business, and then you want to change to make the rules more fair to the consumer, And then those business people say that I don't agree with this, then, let people walk into their own sword, you know what I'm saying? They'll find out that the consumer does agree with it, and the consumer likes it. So if you don't get on board, you don't have no board. The consumer is the board, and you're just going to be out in walking on thin air till you fall. Crazy how that's going to work.
Between the private and public sectors, and in a case like this, I think it's an example of the public sector, right? The people essentially saying, we actually do not like this practice. We don't want this to be the rules of the game. We want the rules of the game to change, to be more robust. And yeah, the market will, once it adapts to that, find a solution. And if the new rule set is a better rule set, then that should be a net good. But of course, none of this will matter if there's no enforcement. Enforcement, because one country making a digital consumer policy often will find difficulty in enforcing it because you're just one little guy. Mr. Belgium always have the joke that for the person in our team that's in Belgium, that boss just can't drop any loot. I don't know, there's an EU firewall or a Belgian firewall. That's a joke, but you get the point. As much as many people have kind of went, Belgium, yo, take him down, it hasn't really mattered because it's just Belgium, just one little guy. It's a bit different here though, and that's because the
That's what I was saying, that if they cut out the EU, that would be the smart decision for them to win. But once you cut out the EU, you cut out other voices that also have a voice. Like, you don't just lose the voice because you cut them out. That voice will become a dissenting voice. And then that voice will grow in popularity because people are going to understand that that's not the right thing to do. And I do think at the end of that line, we get to a point where the consumer wins, and these changes just happen later instead of now.
EU is, 26 other countries, and also Belgium. In 2023, it was worth 25.7 billion euro in game revenues. That's a lot of revenues. And we know that their legislators are willing to take on the likes of Apple and Google when their rulings are being defied. They have done that. But more than that, the companies inside the EU are, part of a big global network, and that does mean that whenever USB-C cables become standardized in the EU, they then become standardized everywhere because of manufacturing limitations. I'm sure Apple would have loved to have continued just selling people Lightning adapters in the States, but ultimately they seem to have saw the way the wind was blowing and made the big change to USB-C. No one wanted to have, of course, a whole factory just making EU-only phones. And again, thinking about the impact that would have had on the whole ecosystem of manufacturing partners, blah, blah, blah. So you can...
Yeah, because even if they don't cut out the EU, but they do the same thing they do to, like, whatever that other place he had said. I was listening, but I forgot. But Belgium. If they do what they did to Belgium, it won't be the same because the EU is like a lot bigger than Belgium. But that will affect the market in a way that can't be ignored, is all I'm saying.
see how with hardware, it does kind of make sense. We can see those software examples where it's...
Sorry, I was trying to remember. And if they split up how they do everything, they'll create logistical issues, and then you'll have the same thing where, like, you'll have to drop a game with several different versions, and that will delay productivity, I believe. I would assume it would delay productivity. Probably not to a percent that you could feel, but it would have an effect. I don't know if the consumer would necessarily feel it as much, but longer development times would be happening, and they will cost more money. So then the game ultimately might cost $2, $3, $5 more, something like that. Give or take, I'm thinking. I'm just spitballing.
Not really the same thing. It's not like you can just go and get an emulator for your iPhone in America, but you can in the EU. So the question then is, will developers want to risk losing a large slice of that EU-derived money? Or will they simply have to ship a cut-down and less exploitative version of their in-game monetization to European countries? If so, it puts them in a fun little dilemma where the American gamer may get a transparently worse deal than, say, the European gamer. And then you can say, well, compare your store to mine. My one is a bit more respectful, doesn't have as much FOMO.
Right, and if you do this in the EU, Americans will not be happy that the whole country is getting a better, different, less exploitative game than us. They will literally have to drop a whole different game to be able to take all those features out and drop. They wouldn't be the same. It would be too different, I think, to do that. Possible, just very confusing, very unpractical, is what I would say.
Doesn't have as many tricksy bundles and things that basically feel like a scam, and that'll be a bad look. That's the dilemma that these companies face, and in a way it's all thanks to a game about horses. So, hero of the day, horse girls. I guess that's a thing. Okay, tell you what though, if you want another story, another big, grand, juicy story, check out this one. It also hits the EU.
So, that was a great video. I do agree. Like, I saw something about some of this earlier, and I like the way that the gaming industry has been going. These changes are great. I support them 120%, and hopefully these come. And I would love to see how the gaming industry responds to this as a whole. And I'll keep an eye on it if y'all care, for me to care. But until next time, that was the side with the flip. Have a good one, everyone. Oh, also like, comment, share, subscribe. Please leave comments. It makes me feel really good. I don't care if they're bad comments or not. Actually, I do. Don't do that.
But yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.
AAA is in trouble.